Hey, welcome to Designing Adobe XD. I'm your host, Talin Wadsworth. We're here on a Friday from the Adobe Studios in San Francisco, and with me is my good friend and talented designer, Gayatri Gaikwad. I just messed it up.
No, that's fine. Nobody
Gaikwad?
can get it right. Gaikwad.
Gaikwad.
Yes.
Gaikwad. Okay, I just have to. Okay, no, I knew I could feel it. I'm gonna mess this up.
You're there. You're
All
always
right.
there.
Gayatri is a very talented designer on Adobe XD. I don't know if you've caught her before on the show because you're still pretty new to the team.
Yeah. 7 months?
Yeah.
6 months?
Yeah. All right, that's exciting.
But this is already my second time.
Yeah,
on
that
here.
was second time. Here we are. So she is joining me today on this Friday. Thanks for just agreeing. I came in and I just slacked her this morning. I'm like, "You want to come on the stream?" And she gamely said yes.
Yes.
And she was missing out on lunch with a bunch of other of our colleagues.
It's all good. It's all
Okay.
for a good cause.
Good. So welcome. Thanks for joining me.
For
It's
sure.
always a pleasure to chat with
Thank you.
And hey, welcome to everybody here in the chat today. How's everybody doing? How's your Friday? Agnes, Edu, Huxel, Kita, how are y'all doing? How's your Friday going? Are you guys working? Are you relaxing at home tonight? Abdul, how are you? How's everybody doing? Here we are, of course, Designing Adobe XD. This is our Friday show where we talk to you about XD. We talk about a lot. We share a lot of our process. Like this is a show for the team to come on and share a little bit about what we're thinking about and answer your questions. Are you using XD to design anything? Are you guys making some great work? We love seeing it, of course. And if you have any questions, let us know. Said we're here to sort of just be here and chat about really exciting stuff. So Ilker, how are you guys doing? It's nice to have you all on with us today. So today, there's been a couple threads on Twitter that got me thinking about something, and I feel like I've always talked about it. Of course, it's built into how I think about design, but I don't know about your take on it. And everybody, this is my question. This is maybe kind of for all of us and for you first. What is a prototype? What is a prototype for and its importance in your design, your day-to-day as a designer, as a UX designer in particular? Like, what's a prototype?
I think a prototype is the simplest way to explain to somebody how something is going to work. And especially with UI and UX, you can say it clicks and then what? And then to jump. I think one of the earliest times we started making prototypes was through PDFs in Illustrator or something.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
When you click a button and it jumps to the screen, and sometimes it's much easier to get your stakeholders, your team members, people who are giving you feedback, and especially engineer development teams to understand what it is you're trying to convey as an experience. I think, put it bluntly, I think prototyping is a huge time saver. And it is the easiest way to communicate when you're designing, especially for screens.
I really love that definition. I think that's such a nice definition. And Kita, yes, it was this crazy thread on Twitter, and I'll pull it up here in a second so we can actually go check it out. But that is exactly the thread I'm referring to.
With 200 links.
With over 200 links. And I kind of wanted to use it as a way, actually, I wanted us to talk about it because I think when I was looking through the thread of comments, I actually felt like there was, I don't think everybody was speaking the same language, right? And I think everybody was sort of seeing this and I was interpreting it one way and other people were interpreting it another way. And maybe even the designer who designed it, he was thinking about it in a very different way. And I wanted to use this as a way for us to talk about how we use prototypes, and that actually extends into like I think the role of prototyping inside of XD. Inside of XD, when you go and you look at the UI, it's design and prototype and share. And I think prototyping is still such a new tool in a way. I think, again, I love your reference to the PDF, the interactive PDF.
Yeah, I did that for a while.
But I think back in those days, would we have called them prototypes when we were doing that?
I think I just called it click-through.
Yeah.
It's click-throughs.
It's definitely, again, prototyping is not yet, I think we don't have, I think, a clear definition of a prototyping. Everybody defines it a little differently.
Also, I think having had, in my first year of college, I was kind of like, what do I want to do? And we had some foundational classes, but prototyping kind of extends to all other disciplines as well, right? Like now that, now software is a product, but even for industrial design, and I'm sure for other disciplines that I'm completely blanking on, having something to hold and see and feel and understand how someone is going to interact with it, because the minute you go to scale, it becomes so much more important for you to understand how it's going to live outside in the world with people.
I think that's I like both of what you're saying, and Keita, I don't know if he's designing for Amazon. I don't know. We'll have to maybe get him to tell us what. I don't remember if he said what this was for. I don't know. I think we should definitely see if I don't know who's running the Twitter, unfortunately. So he should definitely let me know. I want to be properly introduced because we were chatting a lot on Twitter the other day. But yeah, not sure. But yeah, I like what you said about prototyping used for communication and used to communicate designs or a physical object. Right, like to properly evaluate it, the things that you need to communicate are interactivity, motion, or when it comes to like a physical object, you're prototyping like the actual feel or the form of that the object will be taking, and to properly get the feedback that you're looking for, to get maybe the approval, right? It necessitates that design task, whatever it is, that solution necessitates a prototype to be able to properly communicate the experience of the interactive sort of nature of the motion or behavior of your design.
The thing that you're trying to make. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's too early to throw that in there with this discussion too.
Yeah.
But also, it's a big money saver when it comes to building the actual product. It helps facilitate conversations that would have otherwise everybody would have waited for like weeks or months to have, and you can kind of front load those difficult discussions, and people can go away and say, no, this will take too long to build. Can you? And that's kind of what's happening even with our processes as we're working right now, where prototypes become more valuable than just that conversation.
Yes.
It has like
really
a cascading effect.
That is a really great point. And it speaks to, again, like the role of prototyping in our day-to-day process, that even from the very first moment when we start designing, we're already thinking about how a user will interact with it. And so in some ways, it gets to, again, like some of the original sort of ideas of why we started XD, right? We started XD, and you have it up on your screen. Let's go over to yours. So we really, at the time, we were all just, designing, static designs inside of, tools that have been around, when designing for digital, for digital displays, or also designing for, we were using, apps that were designing for print as well, right? And we were designing visuals. But there was, what we were running up against at the time was we were really seeing the gap in communication, in, sharing those screens with clients, with developers. And I, definitely in my work was really aware of the time that it took just to communicate an idea, and then the time it would take when I had delivered some designs and someone maybe had given feedback, or they had started to actually implement it, and then it would come back wrong, or the feedback would be off the mark. Like it wouldn't actually address the thing that I was actually looking for feedback on, and that is because I didn't feel like I had the tools to properly communicate those ideas to those partners, those clients,
Well, also when I first started using XD, what I really liked about design and prototype being together, even before you start sharing your work with somebody else, it's about evaluating your own work. When the ability to like jump from design to prototype really quickly helps you kind of see the missing links in your own work. You kind of realize, well, I didn't need those two screens, or well, I need another screen in there or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Those things become super, super valuable when you're even just designing on your own,
yeah.
to see the errors of your own work, because you don't want to go into a meeting or start presenting to someone and then for the first time realize that, oh, this is missing.
I missed something.
Yeah.
Self-evaluation. I think again that gets to kind of again the motivation of like, well, to help us with the problems that designers are now trying to solve, and if not all of us are maybe industrial designers doing like actual physical objects, we're all, most of design is really taking place of and is for screens, right? And I still miss the days of like doing mostly print design myself. I love those days.
I don't know if that's a thing anymore, but
well, it is. I think there is still that.
A thing anymore in the sense that like when I graduated from undergrad 2012, but we were still doing print, and like web and mobile was an afterthought. So I definitely also for a while spent my time being a print designer.
Yeah, but now it's like it's the other way.
Yeah,
the majority of the time we're starting.
Print is afterthought.
Yeah, print is the thing that we hope to get to.
But then it's like also it's kind of tricky, because when I see some students do like a bookbinding thing, and then they get the edges wrong, and like especially when you print in a certain way when you're doing that, that's interesting prototyping too, because you have to think ahead.
Very true. There is again like there is prototyping again for again if I thought we were honing in on a really nice definition, which was a prototype is meant to communicate, and to communicate effectively, whether it's interactivity and motion, or it's the actual form that the physical object will be taking. That the goal of the prototype is to communicate right around there. So when you start designing in XD again, like it now has prototyping integrated directly into it. It's no longer two separate applications. You're not taking your design, doing your designs in one place, and then going over and prototyping in another. So. And we mentioned that's a huge benefit, I think, to our workflows. But then so when do you start thinking about interactivity then? Like with it, what's your normal process in XD?
I think within the first 4 to 5 screens, I start thinking of prototyping, because I mean a lot of the way that designers work is like you don't never always work in isolation. You have to communicate it. So that's when I always will go back and like wire some things up and see what screen comes after which, and it's hard to explain, but it's almost like a gut feeling of, hey, what's missing? What would a person click on? So within the first 5.
What ideas do you want to communicate?
Right? Exactly.
Yeah, and really being that like gut checking yourself as you're going and problem solving.
Yeah, the first 4 or 5 screens I'm already wiring things up.
Yep.
I think that's also where UX designing is different from I don't know what I'm trying, like a graphic designer or something, where you're not really looking for like a finished product. You're looking for the right flow before you go and start.
Yes, before refining the details. I think that's actually a really nice way to talk about again. And I actually posted about this on Twitter the other day as well. So I shared actually kind of one of our starting points that we've kind of started to kind of rally around. And hey, we want to say hi to a few people popping up in the chat. Anna, how's it going? Munir, great to see you. Anel, how are you? I hope everything is well with you. And Tim, what's going on, man? Good to see you as well. Thanks for joining us. Seeing Tim with that blue check mark, it always feels good.
What is the blue check mark?
Tim is one. He helps moderate the chat with us.
That's cool.
So yeah, he's got the special. He's certified check mark on there. So I actually shared on Twitter. This actually screen that I have on my desktop here, which is again a starting point, a way for us to again like XD. We have a very established kind of UI here, but this has become a really handy tool. I know for me personally, like all of my sort of early concepts and ideas actually really start with this sort of version of XD, because just in its like visuals, I'm communicating something immediately, to whoever's going to be viewing this. And I'm thinking about kind of how these features will start to actually interact and move almost like from the get-go, here inside of XD. So if we were going to be sort of adding some new feature here, and maybe we were going to actually add in like a mode where you could actually go into and like arrange artboards. And actually, this is if of others of you have sort of like seen some of my early designs in the past. This is actually was the idea for a really old feature for artboards and artboard selection. But I'll just sort of show you, again, to sort of get you an idea of kind of how we go about sort of building our prototypes here. Is that, what's really great about XD, about having these sort of, features available, is that, again, I can immediately start, telling the story and validating it to myself first.
Well, I want to throw in that, like, as XD designers, we're familiar with the process of designing and thinking of XD in terms of features and stuff. But what was interesting in the post, you posted this on Twitter, people already started trying to guess what the features would be, even though there are like barely 2 words in this.
Yeah.
So it's the power of like seeing a prototype of, or like a preview of something, and your imagination already starts going.
It's already communicating something to
Yeah.
you. I think it's a really great point. Like
Yeah.
it's already like communicating an idea to the viewer, and the viewer can then start to kind of evaluate, based on that sort of built-in knowledge. Like you're coming at a starting point. We're not having to do a bunch of explanation for you. Like this references XD,
Yeah.
right? So it's
And people
sort of
already
in the
started
context.
noticing small things like, wait, there's one extra tab there.
Oh, there is?
Well,
Oh.
hint, hint. And,
Interesting.
And like, it's kind of amazing. And people were like already trying to guess what
Yeah.
the features were. So you can only imagine, like, within our teams, like how far we get with making these low fidelity prototypes and being able to facilitate conversations internally.
There was this actually some of our early decks. There was this one saying I came across like really early on, and it just really spoke to me about, again, like the adoption of prototypes into my workflow. And maybe it's a little overused right now, but that a prototype is worth 1,000 meetings.
Yes.
Right.
I think we say that internally.
Yeah, we do.
too.
We do. Because again, like I can immediately, like, and like part of this is and we are already telling a story by using the visuals we choose, and now when we start to actually put in, again, like start building in motion and interaction into it, like we are already telling a story here, and to communicate an idea and validating this idea that maybe I can enter into like a little mode here where I can actually start to organize my artboards. And again, prototyping is just fundamentally how we're working as a team.
Also, I think one of the things that we didn't mention is worth mentioning is prototyping is also a great tool to communicate externally, to do user testing. That also is such a big time saver, and for us, a way for us to validate what we're doing. And I know, like, internally as a team, we do a lot of testing and like share it with customers.
Yeah.
And I think when they see it in the most realist way possible, either in the app frame or in the app, or in the preview of a desktop, or how they would use it, it helps us kind of be like, okay, that made sense, or like, oh, we did that wrong, and let's go and reevaluate it, rather than waiting for like a final build to come out to test with people.
Yeah. I mean, and it talks to like the constant sort of iteration upon and the building upon previous prototypes as well, right? That even, I think, all the way up almost through official production of the feature, like prototyping is ongoing.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
I was wondering if maybe you could talk about your experience. So, we actually shared something that you're working on right now on the stream a couple weeks ago. Andrew and I.
All right, yeah.
Gayatri and I have been working very closely together because she's working on a very, very exciting feature that we showed off, linked assets across documents. Right. So we showed off a new feature a couple weeks ago on the stream. You can go check out the episode on our YouTube channel if you missed it. Yeah. With Andrew, where you could actually take assets, global colors, character styles, and symbols from one document and link them to another document.
Into another document, right?
Yeah. So tell me about the role, how you've been using prototyping, like, to solve those problems. Like give maybe like a concrete example of something where you could only solve that problem, or you could only communicate that idea through a prototype.
I think one of the big things that when we first started creating the concept, internally as a team, it would facilitate conversations. But also when like you're working on a product like this, everything might seem like one big cohesive piece. And and I think the intention is always to deliver it that way. But internally, there are lots of teams that have the cascading effect of your designs. Like you can put a button somewhere on the screen and say that it does this and it's going to bring in all these assets, but there are like these steps along the way that can only be approved if that specific team sees it. And the only way to make that team who see the value of it is when they see it in action through a prototype. They see it as a part of a story of, I think one of the biggest things that I was learning to do when I was making prototypes is to kind of balance the user storytelling with the way it would be communicated within Adobe to make people aware of the fact that, hey, by the way, when you click this button, this window pops open, and then someone selects this, and immediately like 5 hands go up in the air and say, okay, I recognize that feature, I recognize that window, my team works on that window.
Yeah.
And then you, depending on the level of fidelity, they can give you feedback immediately and while you're in the meeting. Whereas if I was just showing a static screen, they would never understand that.
They wouldn't, yeah. So you're really balancing kind of user sort of focused communication and testing, with also using it to communicate internally.
Right.
Has been a big part of the role that your prototypes have played in this process.
Like I think oftentimes it's like prototyping helps in the storytelling for both parties, those stakeholders, like the users and the people that you're helping try to build the product.
Yeah. Oh, look, Kevin Lee shows up in the chat. What's up, Mr. Lee? Great to see you. We had such a great time on the chat last week.
Okay.
Kevin got to be the lead designer of XD for the day.
Ooh.
So you were actually secretly taking all your creative direction from Kevin last week. Keita, you had a really great question, and I think you touched on this earlier, Gayatri. So Keita's question was, how do I get a really old-fashioned employer to get how important prototyping is when maybe they'd rather have you start coding to save time? And you mentioned something about solving problems earlier, and actually how valuable that is. Right?
I think, and it might be a naive thing to say, but I think the minute somebody sees a couple of screens prototyped together, it's hard to think that they would not immediately imagine that this would be useful. Like people will say, let's get it coded, but in reality, it'll take you much more time. And you might find a lot of what we call edge cases while you're prototyping, and you might not ever realize that until you've reached like day 14 of coding and be like, wait, we need to rethink this whole thing. And there's a whole architecture that goes below development that you can kind of hand wave around when you're prototyping a little bit. This is beginning to look very familiar.
Ooh, yes, I just thought I was kind of riffing as we went here.
Yeah.
But I think, Gayatri, you make a really great point, which is that yes, I think there are moments when you can start coding, but I think you actually have to have both the expertise and the sort of certainty of like what you're creating. I think that some people, and I will say again, like I think I do know a lot of designers that do love to code, and I think for them and for the level of expertise they have, and for probably the job that they're trying to do, that probably works really well in a lot of cases. And that is definitely a tool that I think is available to designers. So I think if you want to code and you have a really clear idea of what it is you're going to go and make, and maybe really establish patterns that you can build upon, I think it's a great solution. But I think, as you mentioned, particularly in a very complex environment like XD, or maybe like a really complex like e-commerce flow per se, that prototyping can help you solve or actually identify some of those edge cases or some of those scenarios that a user might find themselves in, and help you actually identify them earlier, as if you had gone through and started to code, and it actually might be more costly to undo that code.
It's really interesting you say that too, because I think one of the first few phases of our designs, I went back to it recently, and which it's been shared widely, and I think I realized that they were like, oh wait, it's been shared with like 10 plus people now, and it's very interesting how people build like marketing campaigns, other features, other additions to your design if it's just out there in the world. Like that's the only way I feel like sometimes everybody can align and work together.
That's a good point. Alignment as well, a very important
and
part of
move
prototyping.
faster and give feedback as well. So for like you said, a prototype is worth 100 meetings.
Worth it is. And you know, again, like I think there is a role for coding and a role for coding for designers to be able to code. But again, if you don't know what it is you're going to code yet, and you haven't figured that out, I think it's actually really hard to just sort of dive in. And again, like, could you solve some problems earlier? You know, have solved them through a prototype,
right?
For instance. So again, like, and prototyping is such a big part of what we do.
Also, as you're putting in that word link there, we had conversations about even the word link when we were designing, right? Because once you see that word on a button, and people start being like, oh, what do you mean by link? Do you mean this, or do you mean import? Like, I think you make iterations of what's actually going to be out there so much faster when you see the word link inside a button, because in conversation, repeated, you get feedback. Yeah, we initially had the word
add. I think
add
we tried
in
add.
there.
Yeah. And again,
then we had
trying...
import, and then eventually I think we all settled on link. But I think if we had not, it boils down to if we had not seen that word inside a button in that scenario, in that context, we would not have arrived at that solution.
I mean, I think it speaks to the real power also, again, the real superpower that designers have, is that designers with a prototype are creating the artifacts that drive conversation, that drive projects forward. That unless we can see it and evaluate it, all we're doing is guessing. Right. And a lot of times, actually being a designer means that you're out there in front, you're driving things forward, and it can be you can feel very vulnerable. You can feel very exposed, because again, a prototype is not meant to solve everything. It's meant to put ideas out there so we can properly evaluate them.
Right. I mean, I think there's also something to be said about once people can say you should start coding and stuff, but coding is not devoid of its own prototyping phase as well. Like, I mean, there is a whole period of months that we spend on internal builds, working with them and essentially those are prototypes as well that we test and work with. And even after our full prototyping phase that we go through, and I don't know how many months we save doing that, there are times where like it's gone into a build and we're like, oops, we didn't think of this.
That's very true. That we often, and that was maybe a topic that we can come back on another day, because I'd love to have one of our engineers in here, because we also have, like, they create prototypes that we are evaluating as well at the same time we're designing and creating new prototypes on top of that. So so prototyping, it's never too early to start prototyping. And I think, again, like, what's really crazy about XD is that you can take that prototype as far as you want, or as far as the project demands. And if we go back to that crazy Twitter thread, like, the designer was clearly trying to communicate something here. And even though this is a very crazy edge case, a select all, you can actually see all wires if you go in there. It's not how it looks normally in XD. This is just a really extreme example. But the designer was clearly trying to communicate something to their team. And so however they chose to do it this way, and it helped them get their job done. And I think that's really, again, what a designer needs to be, how they need to be approaching any problem.
I think this also kind of, at the scale, makes people aware of the complexity of the thing that you're working on. I mean, without any words, you can put that screen up in your meeting and people will understand, okay, I need to...
They're like, maybe we're overdoing this.
Yes, and maybe we need to phase this approach out. And like, that's again, like the benefit of prototyping, to be able to plan ahead. a little bit. And
well, Gayatri, you said so many amazing things on prototyping today. It was such a pleasure to have you on. I knew you'd be great to talk about this with. And, you know, again, everybody, soon you'll be able to actually use those great features that Gayatri's been working on for months.
Well, the team's been working on.
The team has been, you've been designing and working with this amazing squad. And we can't wait to get some of those new ones out there to you. But thank you all for joining us. I hope this was valuable. I hope if you guys have prototypes and you want to share it with us, feel free to hit us up on Twitter. We're both out there, and we love seeing the work that you're doing in XD or in anything, really. So thanks for joining us, and Gayatri, thank you for coming on.
It was great to hang out with
Always
you
great to have
and you all too.
Yes. All right, you guys have a great weekend. We'll see you next week at the same time. Have a good one.